welcome back. I see that everyone is connecting. We'll give you a couple of seconds to make sure that your settings are in order and that you can hear us and follow us clearly. Welcome back to what is session number 2 of the 8th online course on teaching refugee law. It's really wonderful to have you all back here with us as we prepare to take the second step of what is a 14-step journey, basically, based on the number of sessions in the agenda. And as we wrap up week number 1 of this course together. Before we dive into the session today, I would first like to take the opportunity to thank you for providing us your feedback to the first session, which you submitted through the online learning platform. This is a practice that we will kind of insist on keeping alive also today, as well as after all of the other sessions that are coming up in the agenda. While the compliments that you provided in the feedback are very welcome and we are very pleased about, we are particularly grateful for you providing us some suggestions for things that we can do better and for things that we can do different. And these are things that we are going to be following as of today, of course, and as of the next sessions that are coming up in the agenda. That being said, we are trying to create an optimal learning environment, really, or the best possible learning environment for all of you. And speaking about learning environment, that is exactly what today's session is all about. Titled The Science of Learning, it is about the crucial aspects of what science tells us about human beings essentially learn and how we can use this to our advantage in working with the different audiences that each of us engage, some of you with student audiences, others with professionals. In addition to being prepared about the content that we teach when it comes to refugee law, knowing our stuff about the legal frameworks that apply and the definitions that are applicable, as well as taking care, of course, of the logistics, we also have to keep in mind that when we teach, we engage with human beings. And to do this in the best way possible, we need to know things about what motivates human beings to learn, how memory works, and also how to provoke the attention of the learners that we engage, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Here to guide us through this process is Dr. Cara McBride, who is a senior technical education specialist at World Learning. She has extensive experience supporting teacher training, curricular reform, and inclusive teaching and learning material creation. She has been supporting teachers in countries such as, for instance, Lebanon and Uzbekistan, where she's calling in from today, as part of her work with USAID, in addition to which she has led the design of an online teacher training course that has been completed by more than 35,000 participants from more than 120 countries worldwide. I think that the biography that Cara has speaks for itself, and I will not take much more of the time that she has planned for what she's going to be presenting to us today. Cara, I am passing to you the floor next. Thank you for being with us, and please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'm very excited to be here with you, and it's an honor to be with you, knowing the good work that you do. So, let me share my screen with you. Nope. This is, okay. So are you seeing this in presentation mode now? Yeah, okay. So today we're talking about the science of learning, how people learn. And we will have times when I'm explaining some ideas, and then multiple times when you will go into breakout rooms to talk about the ideas with other participants. So I encourage you, it's especially when you're in the smaller groups is when it's easiest to talk about the ideas. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that and maybe try not to be too shy. And then we'll also have moments where we're discussing as a group. Our time is limited, so when we're discussing as a group, not everyone will be able to talk, but some people. And you can, when you're joining the discussion, you can, talk on the video, use your voice, or you can chat. Both are good. Some of the breakout room activities will be very quick. And that's okay. You know, we're kind of talking about the ideas, then we'll come back to the group, talk some more. Yep. I will be giving you at 4 different times handouts, and we will give them to you in different ways. I'll put a link into the chat, but also if you have your phone with you, you can use, the QR code will be on the screen. And then you'll also have access to these later in Moodle. So, I think pretty much all the information I'm sharing will be available eventually in a handout for you. So what are we doing today? These are my objectives for what we will be doing. And I hope that by the end of this 2-hour session, you will be able to name at least 3 factors that have a significant impact on how people learn. And I hope that you will be able to describe specific ways that you can use those principles to increase learning in your work context. So this is what I hope for. And I wonder, what would that look like, right? Whenever we're trying to teach something, we want to have observable evidence of learning so that we can know, did they learn or did they not learn? So, thinking about, okay, these are the learning objectives. You can name factors that impact learning, and you can talk about how you personally will use those principles. So if this is a successful workshop, what would you be able to observe? What evidence would there be that, yeah, it worked? So, and I want to think in 2 terms. Today, at the end of the workshop, or maybe during or at the end, what evidence could we see that would tell us it was a successful workshop? And we're thinking about sustainability. So a year from now, what would we be able to see in your life that would tell us, yes, this was successful, and we learned ways of improving learning outcomes. So I hope you're starting to think about these questions on your own. And I want you to now, we're going to be putting you in just a moment to these breakout rooms so that you can discuss, what that would look like, both today and in 1 year from now. So, let's go ahead and do that. Let's spend, let's do a 5 minutes. So it's very quick, but once you get into your room, you'll have about 5 minutes to discuss with your group, what would learning for you look like? Is that clear, or any questions before you go into the breakout rooms?
Okay, I think that everything should be ready. Please feel free to ask any questions that you might have before we join, but Malika and myself will also be stepping into the room. So if there is any support that you might require inside, we will also be able to provide it there.
Okay, so go ahead and do it for 5 minutes. So what are your ideas? Maybe if you would like to share, you can raise your hand, or you can go ahead and type something in the chat as well. And you can answer either question. You don't have to answer both. But if this is a good workshop, what would it look like? Sure, Khalid, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My audience is a bit different because I'm giving workshops for judges and prosecutors, and for me the most challenging thing. I've also been part of building capacity programs in South Sudan, also with the United Nations. And for me, the most challenging thing when it comes to learning is how to measure the outcome of the workshop, how to be able to analyze how much do the participants get from what I've been learning them, and how to do this maybe in one session, or because you don't have much time for such a thing. One of the things I read about, but I was not able to apply that perfect so far, is that you try to get some sort of survey in the beginning of the workshop to measure how much they know about the subject, and then you do the very same thing by the end of the course to see how far they have been progressing. But I think it would be more important for me to learn about different strategies to tackle this issue, or to measure the outcome of any workshop I'm involved with. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Let's take a couple more ideas before I respond to that one. So Mohammed, you have your hand up?
Yes. I think after a discussion with our group, we agreed that the most way to evaluate success is by the evaluation. If you are having an evaluation of today of the participant, like for this session, and you have like an agreement of 70%, it's like, okay, yes, you have succeed. After 1 year, if you give this session to another group and you have like a percentage of success of 90%, or evaluation of the got 90% of agreement between the group, that you can point that you are success in giving the speech and the delivery to the audience. So it is about like a number of statistics. It is statistics. It's which يعني giving like a number that indicate whether you're success or not. It is not about يعني it is, I'm coming from teaching to judges and so on, and the main way to evaluate and evaluate the trainer is by the evaluation. Evaluation is like a guide for our group to know if he is successful or not. I think one
So
way.
you're saying, sorry, you said like 70%, 90% agree with what? What kind of statement?
Like this, like the final product, like you're giving like evaluation of how he delivers the session, how he conduct how the methodology of the session was delivered, how the participant have benefit from the session, how they the material and the time management was okay. It's like we're having like a number that indicate all the factors, and giving us like put a scale from 1 to 5. We got 4 in one part, 3, 2, and we have like the final number for outcome from the different processing that we put in the evaluation. Like we have like an result, like it is about 76.
Great. Okay, let's take one more. Stefan?
Thank you. What I would like to add to the evaluation issue, in speaking in my name, sometimes I'm in doubt how to distinguish between encyclopedia knowledge and the very useful concrete information given to the particular let's say students in my case. So I think that's a kind of very demanding process of balancing. That's the piece of thought that I wanted to share with you.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you for the three. I'll start with the last comments because it's one that actually a lot of ministries of education grapple with. This difference between just having, like you said, encyclopedia knowledge, just facts, versus practical skills. Can you apply it? Can you do something? So a lot of educators are shifting from knowledge-based to competency-based. Can you do this thing? And in general, that's especially now that we have AI and internet, you know, you can look up anything. So it's less of a matter of having information in your head and more of an ability, right? A competency. And so pre-test, post-test, as Khalid was mentioning at the beginning, give information. They can give information about competency. It's easier to make them measuring knowledge, but it's tricky to make good good tests. But it's, you know, it's an important way of getting information, especially if they need to learn specific facts. And evaluation surveys are very important to use. Of course, sometimes, you know, they may just like the workshop, but it's still sometimes hard to know when it's a self-report to know if they really, really learned it. So in my thinking, I will know that things are successful in this workshop as I hear from you. And as I hear you talking about things, and especially, you know, if at the end, when you have the chance to apply this to your context, if you have some good new ideas of how to apply it. And then in a year from now, you will be having more successful trainings or classes, and you'll be seeing people able to, you know, apply the information that you taught them or the skills you taught them very well. Okay, here is our first handout. And it's a handout, like I said, actually, let me put into the chat too a link. Let's see. Go. If you want to access this way, or let me go back to screen sharing so that you can. Lots of windows to be juggling here, but sorry. Well, this is good enough. So yeah, this is a handout that has the adult learning principles, and that's what we're going to talk about the next few minutes. So I'm going to explain these for a few minutes, and then you'll have some time for another breakout room and then more discussion as a group. So adult learning principles, there was a guy named Knowles. I'll be giving you a bibliography too. He wrote in the 80s. So these have been around for a long time. And they are, yeah, how to work with adults. So number one, you want to make sure that the learners, the adults, maybe the judges or the graduate students that you work with, they need to be able to have input. They need to be able to have some say in how things are going. So at the very beginning of this session, they mentioned that the very last session, you gave a survey, you gave some feedback, and that's already being integrated into what they're doing, right? If you're an adult and you never get to have an influence on how things go, you're not, you're not going to feel a connection with the training. So we need to make sure that the learners are feeling that they have actual say, some input. Next, the number 2, learners' experience is the foundation. What I mean by this is that, for example, if you're working with judges, you need to recognize that they are experts, right? You don't want to treat them like children. Instead, you want to take what they already are an expert at and move from there. Yeah. And you want to create a training that will speak to a judge. Or, if you're working with graduate students, you want to have it fit their experience, and you want to use what they bring to the training. You don't want to just ignore their expertise. You want to build on their expertise. Okay. So that's number 2. Number 3, it must be relevant. There needs to be a connection. I can only imagine if you had a workshop with judges and they felt like you were wasting their time and it had nothing to do with their job, they're not going to pay attention. It's not going to be successful. So it needs to feel to them like this is relevant and that it has an impact. It will make a difference for them. All right. And then the last one, it needs to be problem-centered. So we are humans, we are adults, we all have lots of problems. We want to solve our problems. And so when a workshop really connects to the problems that your learners are experiencing, then it's more likely to be successful. Those are the adult learning principles. Are there any questions right now about any of these 4 points? Are you comfortable with those?
I see that
Another
Venera's hand
question?
is up. Please.
Yes. So not a question, but just maybe an addition to the last one, problem-centered and also solution-centered, right? As you
Right.
just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because I also try to make sure that my students are actually equipped with certain tools to be able to
Exactly.
actually address those problems, so that we're looking more at the the positive side as opposed to just dwelling on the problems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for putting it that way, because that's exactly what I meant. Yeah, no, but just talking about problems, why, the point is to address them, as you said. So thank you very much for that. Okay. So more breakout rooms. And why? Because I really well, one of these principles, as we just said, we need to connect it to their context, to their lives, to what they're doing. And it's a little tricky for me. I've never met you before tonight, but I had to prepare this, and I was thinking, well, what do I have in common with these people? I have this workshop in common with you. So what I'd like you to do is apply these learning principles to today, to right now. And in your breakout rooms, then, what I would like you to do is pick one of these principles and create a do, for me, for Kara. and say, well, Kara, you know, if you want to have a successful workshop tonight, you should do this. Do this. That's the do. And actually, if you look at the bottom of your handout too, there's some examples. And one do not. So, you know, Kara, if you are going to have a good workshop, you need to follow the adult learning principles. So please do not lecture for 2 hours straight about boring stuff. That's a do not, right? So let's see. How are we on? Yeah, so let's do another 5-minute breakout room. And this is essentially the question. It's also on your handout, the question. Formulate one do at least and one do not for today's workshop for me. My suggestions for Kara. All right. Well, like last breakout room, let's just hear from you. Raise your hand if you want to share some of your do's and do nots, or go ahead and you can also write in the chat if you prefer. What should I do during this workshop according to, yes, Ahmed.
What we discussed in the group for do, we choose the third one, relevant and impact. And for relevant and impact, for do, we see that encouraging the active participation of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And for do not, I will let it for the colleagues to come in.
Okay.
Thank
Great. Thank you, Judith.
For us, in our group, we picked the problem, how do you call it? Sorry, the problem-centered principle, where we said for the do, it will be good give them an example of something they can relate to, especially from the field work experience that they have, they can understand, and it will set a pace or a tone for both of you to have some exchange of, a good exchange. But for don't, we had an idea that when they ask a question, do not give them a rhetorical answer, an answer that can put them in a limbo or in a situation where they really don't know where to go, you know, like put them in a crossroad situation. So that is what we discussed.
Great, thank you. Great. So Stoyanka. How do you pronounce your name?
Stoyanchi. But yes, but short Stole. Yes, for international use. I can say that we discussed for a little, maybe with few of us, maybe not everyone, and we agreed that we should do more breakout rooms and more examples and more exercises, and for the beginning to get know each other, because we are coming from different places, different experience as there is here. So to get know each other, to make a safe atmosphere, so everyone from us to have a chance to set their thoughts, their thinking, their way of thinking, and to not be embarrassed about it. So to have quite good discussions, and to have everybody to speak. I think this safe atmosphere, what we should create at the beginning, is very necessary. And of course, if we go to this principle, learner's experience foundation, so we should do more practical. So we should we should work on everything through our experience, through our aspects of doing, and very long lecturing, I think it won't it will be do not so
Right.
because our intention will not be the same if we'll just listening something, and I think in practical manner we will not understand or get a lot of with us at home from this lecture. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Yes, and I'm looking at what it says in the chat. Best mechanisms is experiencing something. Yes, absolutely. Right. And so just reading is if it's just abstract reading, it's not it doesn't make that big difference, right? So thank you very much for these do's and these do nots. I hope, you know, I hope that you will find that I'm basically following these ideas. And I am, yeah, very interested in your active participation. I'm very happy already, you know, at what you've been contributing to this discussion. And lots of examples that you can relate to. I heard from all of you, I think, said something about some, you know, make it practical, please. Yes. That's great. Okay, so we're going to move on and keep adding to our pot of principles. And I'm summarizing a lot of neuroscience and several theories, but from lots of different angles, we can come to the conclusion that for someone to learn, they have to pay attention. Now, because that is true, then it tells us some things about motivation and about active participation. So with motivation first, you know, if I'm not motivated, then what am I going to do? I'm not going to pay attention. And if I don't pay attention, I won't learn. So we need to motivate the learner. As we saw, the way we motivate adult learners is connected to their lives. Don't treat them like children. Work with their experience. Make it practical. Give them ways to address their problems. That's how you motivate most adults. Also, you know, maybe attractive materials, you know, dynamic way of presenting. And then number two, active participation. It's necessary for multiple reasons. It's necessary for motivation because most of us get kind of bored if we're not active. But it's even more than that the brain makes the connections through active participation, which, you know, kind of goes along with what Aisha was saying. You know, don't just give us a book. We need to be experiencing something. We need to be active. And so, yeah, we need attention and we need focus. This is kind of a theme that we're going to see even in different principles. We need to be focused. And there are many things that can distract a person and keep them from focusing. So, yeah, Scully just now was saying, you know, we need a positive atmosphere. We need to feel comfortable and able to speak up. And if, on the other hand, we're in an atmosphere where we're worried, we feel inhibited, then this can distract us, and then we can't focus on the learning objective. If a student is too upset, they can't focus. If a learner is too hungry, they can't focus. So there's a lot of things that can keep a person from focusing, and many ways to try to take away the distractions. In our modern day, there are so many distractions. You've got phone ringing and, you know, whatever else you have going on. It's pretty typical for people to think that they can multitask, but it's not true. Research has established that you can really only focus on one thing at a time. And so if you think you're multitasking, what you're actually doing is focusing for a second on this, then focusing for a second on this, and so when you're focusing on this, you're not focusing on the other things. So a good teacher, a good instructor reduces distractions and reduces complexity and gives people one simple thing to focus on at a time. Furthermore, so speaking of distractions, some of our biggest distractions these days are technology related. And technology has really changed the way that we use language. In the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, there've been a lot of substantial changes to how we use language, starting with Twitter. You know, the messages started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And then TikTok, the videos started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. A lot of that is because people's attention spans have become demonstrably shorter and shorter and shorter. We just need to remember that as instructors. We need to know that no learner is listening to us 100% all the time. We have to accept that. And we have to, for example, I know not all of you are listening and paying attention 100%. So I need to give you other ways to get that information that you missed when you were distracted. Maybe through handouts, maybe through coming back to the main point again at a certain time. Just accept that people are distracted. And then another thing that's really changing about language use in the last 10, 20 years is that we're going shorter and shorter texts and fewer words and more images. So people are responding very much to infographics. People, I find, really struggle to comprehend text or to stay focused long enough to read a text if there aren't nice images and infographics fairly often. So for that reason, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about this concept of readability. And I will be giving you, you will get, like I said, all of this on a handout that summarizes some of this, all of this. So if you look on the left side of the page, there's just blah, 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 lots of language. And it makes you kind of not want to read the page. The text on the right side of the page is easier to read. And so when we give our learners handouts, when we put things on a PowerPoint screen, when we design our pages in online learning, we want to follow the rules of readability. So I will review those with you in a moment. But kind of to give you a concrete example, let's look at something here. So if you want, you can look, you know, use your phone to look at this. I'm also going to put it on the screen. And actually, let me also give you the, whoops, the link if I can. So I'll put this in the chat in case you want to see this from your computer. So here we have a document. It's actually a document about this workshop. But it's blurred. You shouldn't be able to read the words. You can read maybe a couple numbers. But so what I want to ask you here is, just without reading the words, where do you find your eyes going? Where are you most attracted? So it's the roundish figures. So those things at the bottom, right? Those are cool. They're like, they look nice. The numbers, those are nice and big and simple. Yeah, so the numbers. And then, you know, I think for me too, the stuff that's on the right side of the page is, you know, there's some images there, and I find my eyes going to it. Yeah, Laura just said. So numbers, figures, drawings. Went to the bottom, yeah, because those are bold colors, right? So even, you know, a lot of aesthetic things, I don't know about you, but, you know, maybe you didn't go into law because you were good at graphic design, but as it turns out, it really helps to design a nice page when you want to get your message across. So, yeah, in the research world and education, they've done these studies where they actually have like cameras that track where people's eyes go. And they've studied, you know, how do people read? And, you know, if you don't think about it, you might think that we just read down the page, but we don't. We kind of go around a lot, when, especially on web pages. And so this research has helped us understand what makes for good page formatting. So do not have a wall of text. That's not good. People kind of, they don't read blocks of text like that. So why is the one on the right easier to read? Well, one of the reasons is because you have headings. Having headings is very, very helpful. Yeah, it lets you know what you're about to read, and that's very good for reading comprehension. You also want to highlight the most important things. You can do that in different ways. You can have different fonts. It can be bigger, colors, like that. And you need space, white space on the page between the words. It's necessary. Sometimes we want to just, you know, save paper maybe. You need to have some space. And then again, just big, long blocks of text are often just skipped. So if you want people to read your text, keep the paragraphs short and have white space between the paragraphs. And then finally, you need to have appropriate font size. So just again, to make it easy to read and attractive. So good job, this institute. I really like your brochures. We can see that, you know, they did that. They have, you know, some nice white space. They used, well, I should have added to this list, you know, the figures also are extremely important. And the most important messages they put in bigger font and they highlighted it, right? And they highlighted it with images as well. So if you want to have your own copy of this, if you don't already, you can pull it up on the through the QR code. I'll send the link in a moment. I don't want to exit right now, but what I want to do right now is actually focus on this part here on the right-hand side, because they talked about what kind of methodology is used in this course. So let's look at that in more detail. And maybe we want to kind of define our terms. So they said they would have keynote speakers. And I think, you know, maybe some of what they mean by that is speakers who you can think like, okay, I think this person is probably an expert, and so I will listen and I will attend because we have these speakers. The second one, simulations. That ties to what a couple of you said earlier. You want to have experience, right? You want to actually, you know, do something, try it out. Case studies, that gets to what you were all talking about in terms of concrete examples, practical examples, things you can relate to, right? Case studies. Next, peer-to-peer exchanges of best practices. So the breakout rooms, right? You getting together, talking with your peers about best practices. Personal projects, so that would be application of you applying to your own needs in a project form. Collective activities, so again, it's kind of interaction. And then also individual assignments, yeah, so that you can apply it to your specific context and your needs. Okay, so there's another breakout room. And what do I want to have you do here in this section is I would like you to discuss, okay, there was this list of methodologies that the Institute said that were going to be used in these workshops. And so I want you to relate that to the adult learning principles or anything else that we've mentioned today, or what you know personally about how education works. You know, you don't have to restrict yourself to what we've talked about so far. So yeah, once again, let's do about 5 minutes of a breakout room, and I'll send the link now too, in case you want to look at the list again, to talk about specifically why are these the methodologies that need to be used. Okay, so 4 or 5 minutes, pretty quick, just to review those specific methodologies. I wanted to, I don't always monitor the chat while I'm in the middle of presenting, but I looked at the chat while you were in breakout rooms, and I noticed that Aisha had mentioned for readability, this idea of not using archaic words like herein and hereafter. Absolutely, yes. Having simple language, you know, and it goes against a lot of traditions. Academics in many traditions have shown that they are, you know, well educated by using big words and archaic words, technical words. And it serves the purpose of showing that you're educated, but it doesn't serve the purpose always of communicating the idea clearly to your learners. So it's one has to speak in many different registers. And I actually also used to be a professor. So for my articles, you know, you use that kind of language, but then, you know, different audiences, it really helps to just make it approachable. Anyhow, so let's hear from you. We have here on the screen this, you know, collection of the different methodologies that were suggested. And so how did you connect those to the learning principles, or maybe other adult learning principles or other learning principles that you're familiar with? What did you talk about in your breakout rooms? So I see one in the chat, keynote speakers as they can lead the whole discussion, which makes way for other methodologies already discussed. Yeah. I mean, and there is that, you know, you need somebody to lead it, to sort of, you know, help focus the group and make sure that you are coming back to the main point and not, you know, just getting lost on something that isn't serving your main objectives. Go ahead, Khalid. I see your hand is raised.
Yes, I think for problem-centered, maybe we use the case studies or simulation. Sometimes also peer-to-peer exchange of best practices helps to tackle the problem of the workshop itself and enable people to engage. If we are talking about relevance and impact, I think this goes to the keynote speakers. I think this is the way they are using in a platform like TED Talks, for example. They bring someone who talks for 10 to 15 minutes about his personal experience. The whole point of the keynote here is to exchange his experience about specific subject to the audience. There is no room for evaluating here or problem solving or whatever. If we're talking about learning experience, I think this goes for the maybe personal projects, maybe collective activities also can serve this purpose. About the input from learners, I think that can be evaluated from the individual assignments.
Good point. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, thank you. Talking at the beginning about how do you know if they're learning, and so individual assignments are one particularly good way of gathering that, and also helping the person process the information. Yeah, go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you. As for our group, we also focused on the relation between problem-centered approach and case studies and simulations because of the following facts. When we do the case study, actually judgments contain the elaboration on the relevant law, some contextual issues of the case, some previous practice of the courts, etc. So it is a kind of interdisciplinary approach if we talk about international law issues. And the simulations actually form a kind of further step where the students can also gain some practical skills in presenting the argumentations, giving answers to the judges' questions, going back to some issues in a rebuttal, etc. So they are getting ready for the practical application of the knowledge.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to look at the chat. You see there's a couple. Let's see here. Volunteer activities. Yeah, so and you know, volunteer activities, it sounds like it's not even a simulation, it's an actual application of, you know, and practicing the skills, getting you to learn how things work. And so at the end here, Aisha, you wrote something about helping introverted people, and that's a great comment. You know, we really need to make conditions so that different kinds of people can participate. Yeah, you want to fix the activity, not fix the person, right? So create activities that people can engage in and can be actively involved. The next comment was something on peer-to-peer exchanges and you know, sharing what other people from their experience, what they've seen has worked. Dalia, go ahead. I see you have your hand raised.
Thanks. I actually just wanted to ask a question because I teach undergraduates and I also teach postgraduate students. And the contrast of the way that they learn, I have such a wide range of ages. Like I can have anywhere from 17 all the way to mature students who have worked already in their 50s and 60s, 70s, so on. And so when we're talking about adult learning versus the way that younger persons learn, I wanted to know more about how these principles fit into that and how you might address such a wide range of ages and experiences.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, because if you have a 17-year-old, are they an adult? And in the case of most 17-year-olds, they don't have as much experience to build off of, and they don't have as much, maybe even of a need to be recognized as an expert. Maybe they're not as much of an expert. And so, I mean, one possibility, because, you know, you can see, I strongly believe in group work, right? One way of working with the differences between students is to assign different roles for people in group work. So, for example, one person might primarily be the person who is taking notes, or one person might be primarily the person who's keeping everyone to stick to the agenda and, you know, kind of work through, you know, okay, we have to do step 1, step 2 now, like that. And also you know, you can't give the best to everyone all the time. I mean, it would make a certain amount of sense to, you know, try different methodologies, both to see what works well with that particular group, as well as to kind of, you know, give the opportunity now for this group to have an activity that is easier for them to participate in and to relate to. And then lastly, I would say that giving people different options for how they respond. So if you're, you know, in the class or as homework, you give them an assignment, but you give them sort of parameters. So you say maybe between 2 and 5, or, you know, so those who are newer and it's hard to even do the 2, they do the 2. But the ones who are more experienced can do the 5. Or another very important variation to offer is that, you know, regardless of age, some people are more comfortable writing. Other people would be more comfortable representing their ideas in an infographic or a video. And then also these things tend to be a little bit, you know, one generation is more, older generations are more comfortable with just writing the essays that they've always written in their lives. Whereas the younger learners these days may be able to shine the most when they're using a media, a different kind of medium, like a video or something like that. So let's take one more comment from Mohammed, and so yes.
Yes, I have a question, like for the case studies, like we are practicing law, and we do have a lot of case studies and so on. And in teaching, like two different perspectives in teaching the case studies. One way is like teaching the case study by illustrating the fact and the problem and giving what is the judgment or the case was about. And another one is by giving the case to the students or to the judges for my practice of field, and giving them like an time to like work on the case to reach the best solution. So what is the best way? Like it is tricky here. I don't know. Yeah, we have the two methods are practicing, but we don't know which is one, which is good. Yeah, from the two methods.
Well, I have a very strong opinion about that, but I would like to ask you, what do you think?
I think from me, I think it is the giving them like the case and to work on, not to just straightening the case and facts and so on. But the other way is common and is used in many different law schools and in our country used a lot. But the other way is yeah, more efficiency, I think. But I don't.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mohammed. So, and maybe we can even get back to this at the end of the session, because now what we're going to do is look at some more principles that will be supporting what you just said. And I think you'll see multiple reasons why, you know, you don't just give people the answers. You keep them actively engaged. You have them work things through. You make them put effort. Effort is needed to have information stay in long-term memory. So, and we'll see some more reasons too that working through a case study is really a better use of a case study than just, you know, giving like, these are the right answers, the end. So thank you for that. And now what I'd like to do then is get into another stretch of kind of presenting some more ideas, essentially a summary of lots and lots of research on how learning works. And what I will be talking about here, a lot of it does come from from brain research that's very recent. So it's extremely exciting to me. When I did my PhD, there weren't very many. It was just beginning to have these studies of the brain, and we didn't, you know, so we had other ways of figuring out how people learned, but those theories have been strongly supported through brain scans and other even more solid evidence. So that's what we'll be going to now. And so you need another handout, and this is the full handout. So this handout has all of what we've seen already, plus the new stuff. And here is the link also in the chat. So I will pause for a moment there in case you need to grab the QR code. I'm sorry, I didn't see earlier. Someone had asked me to put one up for longer. So once you open up the handout, you'll want to scroll down a little bit past the learning, the adult learning, past the readability, get to the additional principles. And the people who have been talking in the video anyway have really good English. I very often work with people who have quite limited English, and I thought, you know, it's better to keep the language simple. So the way these are worded isn't with a lot of technical terms. It's more just kind of practical language that I try to use. So to get started here, there is one of the most important learning theories out there, one of the ones that's most often cited in the universities, in the ministries, is social constructivism. And it has a couple pieces to it. There's the social part and there's the constructivism part. And basically what social constructivism says is that knowledge is constructed through interaction with others. And what's really exciting to me is this was my favorite framework when I was a graduate student, and there was no brain research to back it up. And now there's very, very strong research to back it up, that indeed learning is a social activity. It's social. Human beings are wired to interact with other human beings and discuss and interact in different ways. So my picture here on the screen is of some people standing around a lamp, and they're talking about it. And they have different things to say about the lamp. Maybe one person says, oh, it's kind of cloudy out, let's turn on the lamp. And another person is talking about what kind of lamp it is or what kind of light bulb. And another person is maybe talking about the electricity that's feeding the lamp and the electricity grid. And through this discussion, they're sharing ideas, they're interacting. And what ends up happening is that jointly the group comes to sharing these ideas, and they expand their own understanding of the concept by taking pieces of what the other person said and combining it through social interaction. What we will have in our minds at the end of these conversations is not exactly the same for each person. One person will be sort of more focused on the electricity. One person will be more focused on how expensive it is to pay for that lamp. And another person might just be really thinking about renewable energy. But they will have shared understanding and their own different perspectives. And people represent information in their heads in very, very different ways. But they can still, you can have two people who both understand a concept very well, two people who are experts, but have extremely different ways of representing it in their minds and discussing it, interacting with the material. But they can both be experts. The field of education in general right now is really getting more and more into recognizing how different human beings are and how differently our minds work. We don't think the same way, and that's good. That's a good thing. diversity is good, different perspectives are good. So constructivism. We call it constructivism because it's construction. You make something. So in the old days, when we didn't understand learning very well, we thought of construction as a much more passive activity where there was the learner and they just received knowledge, right? The smart teacher would just give them knowledge and they would receive it just in the same form. But that's not at all actually how learning works. It's an active thing. You have to be paying attention. You have to be doing something. You have to be working with information. So Mohammed, when you were saying, should we just tell them how to interpret the case study or should we have them work with it? Well, we should have them work with it. Yeah. Really get in there, struggle a little. That's how learning happens. That's how you make the connections and how it stays in the long-term memory. And again, you can see all the different houses, right? They've been working with it and it's represented differently in different minds. Okay, now shifting a bit, very connected idea, but a different one. And this is something that has a few different names. Sometimes it's called mental models. Sometimes it's called schemata, which is the fancy Latin plural of the word, or sometimes just schemas, which is the more regular way of doing the plural in English. So when we learn, we're constructing something, right? We're making something, we're constructing something. What are we constructing? We are constructing mental models. So let me give you an example of a restaurant. All of us have in our minds a mental model of a restaurant, right? So, and our mental models, they're not exactly the same, but probably all of us in our mental models have an idea that there's probably some tables and chairs, there's probably a waiter, there's probably a menu, and there's probably like table setting with a plate and silverware. So this is great. Like me, for example, I'm in Uzbekistan right now. I don't speak Uzbek or Russian, actually, unfortunately. So I go into a restaurant and I can't talk to people, but I still basically know what's going on because I have a mental model of restaurants. So I walk into the restaurant, right, and I see this guy, and I think he's a waiter because he's acting in the way that my mental, I have this idea he'll be the one with the little pad of paper, maybe dressed a certain way, and it lets me identify quickly where is the waiter. There's somebody reading something and I can think, oh, that's probably a menu. So these mental models help us encounter something new and quickly understand what's going on. So in a sense, everything we learn has a kind of model. Some are big, some are small. They fit together with different models. Can you think of another example similar to this one of a restaurant where you have a mental model and then when you encounter a new example in the world, your mental model allows you to go, oh, okay, that's probably this, that's probably that. Can you think of an example? You see something in the chat, a hotel, great. Yeah, when I walked into the hotel, I saw this long counter and some people standing behind it. And I didn't wonder why they were there. I figured that must be the reception desk. And those are the people working at the hotel. So I talked to them. I don't talk to the other ones over there with the suitcases because I figure they're probably guests like me. You know, so that helps me, you know, quickly understand. A bus stop, yep, same kind of thing. I know that you know, there's a schedule, and if I stand here long enough, a bus should come by, and hopefully it'll say, you know, where it's going on in the window, things like that. So very good examples. Or, you know, like a class too, you know, the person who's doing the most talking, she's probably the instructor. Now, and I just wanted to say, you know, like, for example, also, I wanted to give the example, like a courtroom. Those of you who work with judges, you know, that's probably the judge, that's probably the lawyer, etc. Okay. All right, now another one. Although they're all connected. So you can't just learn something completely entirely new. All learning connects in some way to something that you already knew. And if you cannot make any connection to something you already know, then you can't learn that new thing. It's absolutely necessary to make that connection. And the more you can make connections with what your learners already know, the more you facilitate learning. So if I can, yeah, I'm talking about kind of everyday things. I talked about restaurants. I didn't talk about just abstract learning theory, right? If you're working with your students, you need to not start with some very unknown piece, but connect to maybe last lesson or the course they took last semester or a life experience that you know that they're familiar with. So you connect to what they already know, and we call this connecting to prior knowledge. Another one. You know, again, you can't make this huge leap. You need to have little tiny steps, and you go step by step by step, or you bridge between the prior knowledge, the old knowledge, and the new knowledge. So you need to make these connections for learners. So for example, let's say that I have to train some people on, you know, some clerk who needs to do something with refugee law. So this first stone is where the clerk, their knowledge and understanding is at the beginning, before the training. And then where I want to end up is at the other side. And I need to get them to be really efficient at the end of the training. So they can't leap across the river, and they can't just go from beginning to end in one step. You need to go step by step. So you really need to break down the learning into little pieces. So here's another way of looking at it. I really like this picture, you know, on the right. It's kind of a metaphor for lots of things, but this is also how learning works. You just break it down in little tiny pieces. Another fact about how the human brain learns is that by remembering or recalling something, it's like clearing a path. So if I remember something every day, if I use a piece of information every day, then I really know it and I really can use it fast. Like, for example, I studied French a long time ago. I don't use it every day. So it's hard for me to access that information, and I'm slow to access my French words. So this is one of the reasons that some form of repetition, hopefully not boring, but some kind of coming back to information helps keep it in the person's memory and helps them use it with much greater ease. Just the same way as when you walk down a path. The more you walk down the path, the clearer the path is, it's easier to walk. Here's another one, and this connects to many, many of the comments that you made in the early part of our workshop today. The brain actually works really quite a lot like the body does. So if you want to be good at biking, bike. If you want to be good at karate, practice karate. If you want to learn a skill, practice that skill. If you want to know a fact, work with that. So the more your learning sessions are similar to what you're training them on, the more effective. If you want them to be able to file papers efficiently, have them file the papers and help them while they're doing it until they're able to do it easily by themselves. But on the other hand, just like the body, the brain, gets tired after a while. So you practice, 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 and then you need to rest. Rest between learning sessions helps learning. This is also called distributed practice, that if you have learning sessions, learn, rest, learn, rest. That's the best. It's the best way to learn something. And here we're at the next to the last one. Are you all familiar with this diagram? This is a famous experiment. Pavlov's dog. I think a lot of people have heard about this. So there was this psychologist who worked with dogs, and he would train them. So he would present them with meat and ring a bell. And so when they saw the meat, they would start salivating, and then they'd hear the bell. And then after a number of times of doing these two things together, eventually they become connected in the dog's mind, the dog's response. And until you could just ring the bell and the dog would salivate. So this can kind of be summarized by a nice little saying in English that rhymes: neurons that fire together wire together. So neurons are the cells in your brain. And it's actually true. If you present two stimuli or two pieces of information, two things together, if you keep presenting them together, then that connection becomes automatically wired in the learner's brain. So this helps explain how some of us, when we're really, good at something like driving, we automatically do things. We have, oh, I see the stop sign, you stop. You don't have to think about it. So repeating and putting things that need to be together, this helps the learning, and it makes it more and more automatic. Unfortunately, though, this also relates to trauma. So, for example, if a person has been through a very traumatic experience, if they've been in a war zone, if they've been around explosions, then any loud noise can cause trauma in that person because they have had that connection. Loud noise, bomb. Or, you know, other kinds of connections like this. So this neurons that fire together, wire together, can help us teach. But we also need to be aware that people who have experienced trauma can be triggered into what seems like irrational behavior by some kind of sound or sight that just got connected to the trauma. And that brings us to our last point here. Again, that we just need to be aware that emotions are an extremely important part of life, of learning, of everything. Emotions are always there, and we can't pretend like they're not there. And so that comes back to, you know, something that I think some people were saying earlier: you need to have a positive environment. If people don't feel good, they're not going to participate, they're not going to learn as much. But also, if people are feeling threatened for whatever reason, and, you know, like we saw, sometimes the reasons are kind of irrational, you know, like that it's not a connection that other people have. But if people, for whatever reason, feel threatened, then science has actually shown that the front part of your brain, where the critical thinking happens, shuts down. The activity actually stops, and the survival part of your brain takes over. At that time, the learner is not learning anything. Your student is not learning anything. So if a person is experiencing emotional duress and stress, learning stops. So that's kind of a summary, I think, of the most important learning principles, all kind of in a simple list of 11. And so now I want to see, you know, was I successful? Did this make sense to you? Are you understanding what's going on? So we're going to look at a couple examples just to kind of check your comprehension. In my mind, at least, there's one best answer for each one of these, but you know, you can argue for more than one. And at any given time, multiple principles are always relevant. So we'll look at 5 of these, and then the big event, you'll have a breakout room again to talk about how you can, you know, use these ideas in practical ways in your context. So let's look at context number 1. So here's an example. You're doing an orientation. You've got some new employees, and you need to teach them their tasks at work. So our guy, his name's Jahangir, and because my husband's name is Jahangir, so I named him that. And he's got this. He needs to teach his new people maybe how to file. Let's go back to the filing system. And so to train them, he decided he's just going to do filing with the staff, and he's supporting them as they learn the system. And after practicing with them, they learn the system. Success. So what principle is functioning there? Can we say that this is mostly that principle number 1, that you have to pay attention in order to learn? Or is this an example of mental models to interpret a new situation? Or is this mostly just, you know, to improve a skill, you want to practice that skill? What do you think? Number 9, says Kapka. I agree. Yes, 1 and 9. Yes, I agree also with that one too. So 9 is the main one I had in mind because, you know, they need to learn how to file. What's the best way to learn? Doing it with somebody who already knows, who can help you at the beginning. But number 1 is also true. If you're trying to do this with your new employees and they're not paying attention, well, they're not going to learn. And arguably, I'm sure, you know, mental models are part of that too, but it's not as primary. Okay. Number 2, what is going on here? Oh, we've got a filing system. Okay. So Jahangir has his staff. They're learning how to file. I have a lot of pieces to be read. And so let's say that Jahangir is working with somebody, her name's Banu, and she needs to learn how to file, and it's difficult for her at the beginning. She doesn't really quite understand the system. But then, you know, what Jahangir does is he's like, oh, you see, it's just like the way your phone works. It you know, and he makes a metaphor that she is able to relate to. And that helps. Now, with making this comparison to the cell phone and how it works, her beloved cell phone, she learns what she needs to learn. So is this primarily a case of mental resources are limited? Is it primarily a case of you need to connect to prior knowledge and what the learner already knows? Or is it that you need to keep repeating in order to really stick things in people's minds? Well, repeat, 5, 5, 5. Yes, I agree. Yeah, because she knows her phone. And so, you know, to help her understand the filing, he bases it on what she already understands about her phone and makes that connection for her. Mental resources are limited in the sense of maybe she was distracted before, maybe she was trying to do too many things before. That could be another reason why she wasn't paying attention. And when you go, oh, but it's just like your phone, and she's like, all right, like my phone, she pays attention again, then she's focused again and able to learn. All right, so another one. So there's a new staff person, yet another person. And, you know, because they already have the training, they were able to give this new staff the manual. But, you know, he read the manual, it didn't make that much sense. But then, you know, he talked to this Banu who already understood. And after discussing with her, okay, then he was able to understand. So which one do you think it is? Number 1, to learn, you must pay attention. 3, we learn through interaction with others. Or 10, neurons that fire together. Wired. So I see 3, 3, 3, and 10, 3, 3. Yep, so primarily I would say what I was trying to illustrate here is that a lot of times it's only once we start talking something through that we're able to understand it. It's actually true, you know, writing about something too can also help you understand something. And then, you know, there could be a lot of connections that are made in that conversation. Let's look at one more. Okay, so here's the last one. So, you know, Jahangir has this great staff and there's, you know, things are going really well. So they're celebrating, but bang, one of the balloons popped and, you know, somebody in the room became very upset at that point. So what do you think is going on there? Is it that variation, everybody learns in a different way? Is it that neurons that fire together wire together? Or is it that panic stops critical thinking?
Number 11.
Yep. So probably this person heard this loud noise and it triggered something in them, and it can cause someone to get very upset. Okay, so now it's time to go into breakout rooms. We're gonna give you maybe 6 minutes for this, and you know, you can't unfortunately each talk about your different, but try to choose one of these principles and apply it and talk about how you could use it to increase learning in the situations you work in. Well, welcome back, everybody. I know that was really, really, really short. Time is short, so I wanted to be able to hear from a couple of you. So do we have anyone want to volunteer, or again, writing in the chat is also great. Some of your ideas about how you could use these. Principles. Yes, Fletcher, go ahead.
Yes, I think in our group, I shared with them, I think, an experience that you would die for one, because me, I'm working with the immigration department in Malawi. But then I think we are bringing in new technologies in the area of issuance of passports, visas, and even border control. And for me to be able to learn, I think because it was because of maybe the social interaction that we've talked about. Because then I think when the contractors would come, they would bring all sorts of manuals and stuff like that, which we couldn't understand in the first place. But then I think having been a part of the design process, then we're able to understand through interaction with them. And again, we're also able to, impart the same knowledge as trainer of trainers to our fellow officers, so that they're able to understand the systems very, very well. So I think that's one practical example that I shared with our group.
A good one. Yeah, and you know, I've been really struck. Like, I love technology and I work with technology, but boy, the COVID really showed how, you know, being in the same room with somebody, seeing their facial expressions, their gestures, it's not just the words, right? It's lots of things in social interaction, you know, that help learning. Prantic, you have your hand raised.
Thanks for giving me the floor. Sorry for keeping the video off as my connectivity is a little bit poor. So basically, in our group, we have 2 points came up in the discussion. First of all, my context, as I'm working in Bangladesh with the Rohingya learners. So for them, having the idea and being informed and aware about the existing refugee laws, and to do advocacy for them to avail the rights and other things is much important. So based on that context, I picked the principle of problem centered, and through that I mentioned that in upcoming days probably I will try to address them through doing workshop or embedded the policy related materials in as learning materials. So at that point, one of our group member added that building up the connection while having the session or workshop with them, building the connectivity with their previous knowledge and other things. This will help them to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, I mean, really, learning is essentially just different kinds of connections. Connections in the brain, connections between people, connections between ideas, connections between your life and this theory. Go ahead, Khaled.
I think from my experience that the principle you are using depends on the situation, the setup itself, because I had the chance to work with the UN mission in South Sudan, in a place called Unity State. There was no technology, no resources or whatever. You only have flipped charts, and the only way to you can manage is to communicate with the participant, try to let them express their personal experience about the subject first, and then you go and build up on this. This was the only way, especially that most of them also were not able to write well, so you cannot even use the assignments or anything like this. So you have to examine the setup itself very well, and then you have to decide which is the best way to deliver your goals from the workshop.
Absolutely. I mean, it needs to be relevant, and every context is different. So
Exactly.
thank you. That's the perfect way to end this. I hope that this has been helpful, and I really appreciate all of your active participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kara. What I can say is that today you've really touched upon many things that we will continue unpacking in the sessions that are coming up. You started, for example, with learning objectives, and this is something that will be the subject of a session that's coming in a couple of weeks. We mentioned evaluation at some point. I think that the way that the tempo at which you were speaking and the way that you were using gestures as well relates to facilitation techniques, which we're going to be covering at a later point in the course. So I really think that you've left a lot for us to unpack further. But more than anything, I would say that everything that you've been saying is something that should really permeate across the entire process of deliberating about how to design a course and how to approach the audience, etc., etc. So I'd really like to thank you for that on behalf of our team and on behalf of all of the participants who are here as well. As far as the participants are concerned, of course, to thank all of you for your active participation. I know that some of you might have had some inputs that you were not able to put forward in the time that we had for the discussions. But again, this is something that we are going to be able to do in the upcoming sessions as well. We are only at step number 2 out of 14, so there's plenty of time for us to do this. Already on Monday next week, we are going to meet for the 3rd time, and we are going to start going through what the learning design cycle is, following the logic of this so-called ADDIE instructional model, where we are going to go through the individual steps of putting together a program, starting by analyzing the context, then going into design, developing learning materials, implementing, and eventually looking into evaluation as well. In the meantime, I would like to invite you once again to visit our online learning platform at the end of this session through the link that Abby provided in the chat. And we would, of course, be very grateful for the feedback that you might provide us there for things that we can do, for things that we might be doing well that you like, but also particularly for things that you would suggest that we can do differently so that we can create a more conducive and a more effective learning environment for all of you. We look forward to seeing you again on Monday. In the meantime, we wish you a good weekend ahead and all the very best. See you soon.